Okay, yeah. Good morning, everybody. I know we're a little bit early, but I was going to do a couple deep breaths anyways before I started, and so all other people are trickling in. I just, but if it's okay, or do you want to wait?
Just a quick announcement that if he does run out of time and gets too many questions, it's all good because we have a panel discussion coming up in just a few hours, and that's where will be a great chance for Q&A with Sean and his whole posse of people that he's arranged. So this is about the most exciting panel I can recall in the last several years. We have a lot of experts working on decriminalization, so definitely plan to be back for that.
Cool.
Take it away.
Thanks, Britt. Thanks, Telluride. Such an honor to be back here for my third Mushroom Festival, my first in person as a speaker. I got to speak last year. So glad we can all come back together. But yeah, I just thought we'd start with a few deep breaths here. We're going to be talking about some serious legal things, and I'm going to be diving into the strategy of the movement, and I'm really going to actually start with a kind of fun political firebrand speech, kind of the speech I always wanted to give about why psychedelics should be legal. After a little bio, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to break into the real details of Denver, Oakland, Santa Cruz, California, Oregon, Colorado 2022. So we're going to get into a lot of serious things, and I just thought, let's take 3 deep breaths before we start, because it is a complicated topic, but we are students of the mushrooms, students of the plants, and they teach us to slow down, that everything is better when we're mindful. So just everybody take a couple deep breaths here, and like Thich Nhat Hanh would say, as we breathe in, we enjoy breathing in. As we breathe out, we enjoy breathing out. As we breathe in, we're at ease. As we breathe out, we're calm. As we breathe in, we see a future where mushrooms are respected and protected. As we breathe out, we see ourselves participating in the dialogue and finding a way to help with this movement. So yeah. Thank you for doing that. These are actually a lot of notes here, and so I apologize for all the words. This is a typical lawyer PowerPoint. I didn't intend to show this, but they tricked me into going in and show it. So let's see if I can do a lot of this, hit the highlights here. But like I said, it's so great to be back in Telluride. I've been to many bluegrass festivals, blues and brews festivals, 3 mushroom festivals, but I was also here in 2005, if you will notice the screen here. My history goes back in drug policy reform to 1996, when I came to Colorado to be an environmental lawyer, and I did that for 5 years early in my career. And being a part of the plant medicine community, I always have a little bit of sorrow that I stepped away from environmental law, because I love this planet so much, because I'm earth-informed, because I know that the plants and medicines have so much to teach us. But then I realized that being a part of the psychedelic and plant medicine movement, the cannabis movement, this is an environmental movement. This is connecting us to the earth. This does give us a way to express our values. And so in law school, I got turned on by the social justice aspects of the war on drugs, and began volunteering on the Colorado Prison Moratorium Coalition. We'd seen in the mid-90s the drug war of the 80s really take bloom, and our prison population had exploded. We'd seen the prison budget in Colorado go from the 11th priority in our budget to the 3rd priority in our budget, right after schools and healthcare. We saw real dollars coming out of education, healthcare, all the important values we really care about, to warehouse people using drugs and dealing drugs. And so this was the thing that fired me up, and I looked at this and said, yes, I love the earth, but maybe we can fix this broken social system of the drug war. And so I started volunteering in 2004. I stepped to the plate when Marijuana Policy Project was looking for someone to run an organization in Colorado. I stepped up, put the team together, and we formed Sensible Colorado, that ended up running and co-chairing all the legalization initiatives in Colorado from 2005 through 2012. I was honored to be a part of that movement and that leadership. And that's why I said the last time, one of the first times I was here was in 2005. The first initiatives we did were in Denver and Telluride. We came here with Question 200 in 2005, and we got local signatures, and we put it on the ballot. And of course, we went to see your legendary Sheriff Masters, and we were shocked that what we realized is that Telluride is such a damn independent community. There were voices saying, don't have these Denver people coming in here telling us how to run our laws. We don't arrest anybody for cannabis anyways. And so we lost Question 200 in Telluride by 13 votes. If just 13 of you had voted the other way, Telluride would have been part of those initial wins that changed the law on cannabis. And so that's another reason it's special for me to be back here, because you all have always been such leaders, and this conference is such an important coming together of our community. But this cannabis lesson, and I've spent 12 years as a cannabis and hemp regulatory and business attorney, this lesson has so many things to teach us about our psychedelic movement, because look what we did. Denver in 2005, we actually doubled down in Denver in 2007 to broaden the decriminalization in Denver. I was living in Breckenridge in 2004 to 2011. I was so proud of my hometown of Breckenridge in 2009, where 70% of voters said that we should legalize cannabis. And we built a statewide movement based on local initiatives. And we showed the world that it wasn't a fringe radical issue, that when 70% of people in Breckenridge said we should legalize pot, and a majority in Denver said it, this isn't some fringe hippie culture. This is mainstream culture. This is culture. And so that's how we built the cannabis movement until we eventually won in 2012. So since then, I have a very deep personal story about my own healing journey and spiritual path with psychedelics, and I'd be happy to share with anybody one-on-one. But I really did come back to psychedelics 5 years ago out of seeking healing around family trauma, and found such deep healing and inspiration and deep spiritual connection, and that community we all share, to sit in a circle with people and hold space and hold each other. You know, I came back from an ayahuasca journey and said, hey, Rick Doblin, how do I help? And then this is the way I've been helping in the last 5 years. I'm heavily involved in the Chacruna Institute for Psychedelic Plant Medicines. If you haven't been to chacruna.net, it's the leading educational organization out there. MAPS is great, but they're not going to run any ballot initiatives for us. Chacruna is on the leading edge. I'm on the Denver Mayor's Psilocybin Review Panel. I'm going to be talking about that. I'm also a lawyer in California. We're going to talk about that. So the point is, I'm so grateful to be a part of this community. I'm so grateful to be part of this psychedelic renaissance. I should cover this up. You're not allowed to see this. Okay. No, I'll put it up there. But look, I want to do this first, because then we're going to talk about the details. But what I'm looking for here is what resonates with you. We're still looking for the top couple bullet points in our movement. What is the leading message in this movement? What does it mean to be in favor of psilocybin or psychedelic law reform? And what I want to say first and foremost is that it's a human rights campaign, that we should embrace ourselves as a natural member of a human rights campaign, that we stand shoulder to shoulder, not to draw moral equivalence, but shoulder to shoulder with other intergenerational social movements. We have to remember that we are re-legalizing these substances. They have only been illegal for 50 years, since 1970. So this is a movement to reclaim our sovereignty. We're going to be talking about this later. And I think this is an important movement to draw lessons from. This is a social justice movement to end the racist drug war, to repair the breach between our communities. This is a right to heal movement to control how we heal ourselves. And the word right to heal is such an umbrella term. It's not just about healing our trauma. It's not just about healing our spiritual lives. It's about healing our communities. It's about healing the way our economy works. It's about healing our government. It's about healing so many different parts of what we do. That's an umbrella statement, but we do have a right to heal, and that's part of what this movement is about. It's a cognitive liberty movement about the right to choose your state of consciousness as long as you do no harm to others. What's wrong with this? So this is, yeah, there you go. It's a religious liberty movement. This is about being able to commune with the divine on your own terms without somebody telling you whether that's okay or not. It's a reciprocity movement to show respect and give thanks to the indigenous medicine keepers who kept these medicines alive. Even for Irish people like me who have it in our ancient history, the modern living medicine keepers deserve to be recognized. They have been intercultural with us, and we have to give back to them. And that's why I say it's an intersectional movement. It's a mycelial movement. If you care about environmental rights, you're at home in this movement. If you care about LGBTQIA rights, this is your movement. If you care about indigenous, mental health, social responsible capitalism, veterans' rights, you're at home in this movement. This is a movement that brings together all those important social movements under one umbrella, that there is something about psychedelics that touches each one of those. If you want to cure the trauma of racism, if you want to cure the trauma of being an LGBTQ person in this culture, then psychedelics have something to tell us. If you want to work on suicide prevention and overdose prevention, then psychedelics have something to teach us. That is how intersectional this movement is, and we cannot forget how important it is and how many things it touches. So I want to celebrate that. But I mean, all these things, you know, I will riff off the Ethan Nadelman thing. It's worth saying. You know, what does cannabis teach us about legalization? Why did cannabis get legalized? Remember, cannabis is a minority thing. Only 20% of Americans smoke cannabis regularly. Psychedelics are even less frequent than cannabis. So we have to exist at the tolerance of the majority. That's going to be part of what we're working on here. And so what Ethan Nadelman would say, why did cannabis get legalized? Yeah, you know, God, and my elder, Ethan Nadelman, I was with him 2 weeks ago. Thank God for our elders and our teachers and those who brought this wisdom to us. But, you know, Ethan would say, look, why did cannabis get legalized? Yes, the people that smoke cannabis wanted to legalize it. They want to make love all afternoon while high. They want to go to the movies. They want to do art. They want to do creative things. Of course, they want to legalize cannabis. But even the people who don't care about cannabis wanted to legalize it or were willing to legalize it because they wanted to raise tax dollars or they thought people should be left alone in their homes to do whatever they wanted. So even the people who didn't care about cannabis wanted it legalized. And then even the people who hated drugs, who hated cannabis, who saw it destroy families, who saw people put in prison over drug use or distribution, even those people who hated drugs wanted it changed because they knew the injustice of the drug war was much worse than the drugs themselves. And so when the people who love the drugs want to legalize them, and the people who don't care about the drugs want to legalize them, and even the people who hate the drugs want to legalize them, then you have a majority movement that cannot be stopped and will change the law and change the future forever. And that's, you know, that is where we have to get with psychedelics. We have the people who love psychedelics on our side. We have most of the people who don't care or say, do it what you want. They're on our side. We have a lot of education and work to do for the people that don't trust it, that hate it, that think it's a deterioration of the culture, that think it's destructive. So those are the aspects of the movement we have to work on here. Oh, maybe I'll have to do it from memory. There we go. Oop. Yeah. All right. I promised we were going to get to the thing you guys came for, but no, I wanted to say those things because please come up to me after and tell me what resonates with you. Is it medicalization? Is it cognitive liberty? Is it religious liberty? We're very interested to hear what the community thinks about what the best message is for these substances. All right, so what has been going on in the psychedelic revolution? Well, this is a short list of cities, but of course, Denver in 2019 set the precedent thanks to brothers and sisters in this room, Duffy and Travis and Fluck and Kevin Matthews, who's not here this weekend, and all these great activists in Denver came together. And you know, there wasn't any major organization behind them in Denver. They just stepped up, gathered signatures, and said the possession, storage, and cultivation of psilocybin in the city of Denver should be the lowest law enforcement priority of our city. We do not think people should be arrested for possession, cultivation, and storage. And Denver shocked the world in 2019. I mean, election night was such a classic night. You know, we were a little bit behind up until 11 o'clock at night. Everybody was worried we might lose, and, you know, the cataract kid of psilocybin comes back to life like a zombie the next morning because these mail-in ballots and absentee ballots came in, and we won by a couple thousand votes out of 150,000 votes. Yeah, Denver. And what an amazing night it was, and what an amazing thing we've done, because just shortly after it, Oakland stepped up to the plate. And I'm going to talk a lot about Denver here in a second, but this is just a quick overview that Oakland followed about 2 months later with a citizens-initiated ordinance, but actually passed it through the city council of Oakland. And my friends at Decriminalize Nature in Oakland are great models and heroes for all of us. Their policy is we shouldn't be bypassing the political process. We should be taking over the political process. We should be going to our city council people and speaking to them about the wisdom of our movement. And they, in fact, got a law passed through the city council of Oakland, not just decriminalizing psilocybin, but all entheogens. All entheogens, including beyond possession for non-commercial distribution, for, it's a super broad decriminalization in Oakland. And Santa Cruz followed shortly after, a little more narrow than Oakland. Ann Arbor, all these other places, Oakland, Santa Cruz, Ann Arbor, and Washington, D.C., have decriminalized all entheogens, not just psychedelic, not just psilocybin. And the same thing, Massachusetts has three cities that are on board at this point. So yeah, what did Denver do? I already kind of covered this. We decriminalized possession. So there's a lot of misinformation about what I-301 did, and probably the most common thing is, oh great, I can distribute psilocybin now in Denver. Oh shit, I wish that was the case. Technically, it is still illegal to even share psilocybin in the city of Denver. So under state law, because the drug war was so evil, even if you share drugs with somebody for no money, that's still distribution, because they want to get at the hard drug sharers, the heroin sharers, all the things that happen out there, and they want to criminalize that person that shares it. They want to disincentivize that person to share. So technically, even right now in Denver, if I share my psilocybin with you, I'm a felon. I mean, that's how backwards the law still is. And the good news is we're working on that. But my point is, there are some things that are protected. You know, you can possess, cultivate, and store psilocybin in Denver. And, you know, people have made this mistake. There was this guy that came out in the media and said, great, now it's decriminalized, so I can sell it, and he's possessing it, I'm possessing it. This guy is like, you know, a Darwin Award nominee, because he has a brand and a logo, and the feds looked him up on Instagram and found his logo, figured out his site, and went and raided his house and prosecuted him. What's that? He wears a t-shirt with his logo. Yeah, he wore his t-shirt with his logo on TV, right, and on a news story. So, yeah, I don't want to make fun of the guy, because actually our dealers and distributors are great heroes. They take great risks to provide these substances to us, but they're still, this is the mentality of the drug wars, that dealers are bad and users are good. So we're working on this in Denver, and the good news is we met for a year on this psilocybin. Again, this is ridiculous, all these words. We met for a year on this psilocybin review panel. We had the DA, Beth McCann. We had a chief of the Denver police, not the chief, but a section head chief. We had Denver sheriff and all these other people. And it was amazing, because, again, we are winning the arguments with policymakers. The science is on our side with psilocybin. You know, the economics of the drug war are on our side. The morals are on our side, the spirituality. And we put some reforms to these policymakers, and they agreed with things like sharing should not be criminalized in the city of Denver. That sharing and communal use and gifting without money should be okay, because that shouldn't be a priority of the Denver police. And where we are right now is we finished this recommendations. This report is being finalized right now, and we're going to the Denver City Council in the coming weeks. And you're going to see a debate with the Denver City Council in the fall about whether we can expand I-301 to include gifting and sharing without remuneration here, with that fancy word for money. But this is a key issue. You know, this is actually one of the key things we're hung up on in this movement is what about money and psychedelics and how does this work and can people get paid? And, the easiest thing to do is start with no. Let's just share it. Let's just grow it and share it. And so, we're very excited. These are the actual recommendations coming out of this report. We're going to have the first ever harm reduction training of first responders in Denver, led by MAPS, to teach first responders how to handle psychedelics. Yeah, because right now, if you're out of control, they put you in a small cell, basically with padded walls, and that's not maybe the best thing to do for somebody in a severe psychotic moment with psychedelics. But, Denver is leading the way in a lot of ways on its responding with co-responder trainings, and we have mental health providers that go out with police to respond to people having drug-induced incidents. But this is a historic thing, and MAPS hopes to do this in many cities around the country. We also, the recommendations include the city should be doing public service announcements about psilocybin. Start low and go slow. You can always eat more, you can't eat less. And to have the city educating people feels like an amazing accomplishment if we can get that done. So that's another one coming. So these are the recommendations that we're coming with, and we're going to need community involvement. We're going to need community support. I think no Denver City Council person stepped out and supported I-301 before it passed. And so I really encourage anybody in the Denver community to contact us, figure out how you can get involved. We need people with relationships with these city council folks to be talking to them, to make them understand how important this is. I think they see very little upside to supporting it. So that's Denver, but it's happening this fall. Please stay with us. Please get involved. Oregon, way too many words again. I can tell you Oregon is another legendary moment in our history, the first state to fully legalize psilocybin possession and use. Can we give it up for Oregon? I love Oregon, but I almost moved there, but I got to the coast and it was so cold. I was like, oh, I can't do this. But I love the people there. They're amazing. Sherry and Tom Eckert, two therapists who developed this initiative, deserve tons of historic credit. Rest in peace, Sherry Eckert, who died just recently after passing Measure 109, which is what it ended up being. But Measure 109 was a companion initiative to Measure 110. Oregon decriminalized possession of all drugs. It sounds more exciting than it is because it's still a crime in Oregon to possess drugs. The quantities are small, and all they can do now, though, is either fine you $100 or tell you to go see a doctor to get a mental health evaluation, but you can't go to jail or prison for simple possession. So that's an amazing thing. That includes psilocybin. But that's really the exciting half for us is the psilocybin Measure 109, and it's basically an adult use hybridized medical model. It says that you have to go to a therapy center. There's licensed providers at a therapy center. You can go there, have the experience, stay until you're sober, and then you go home. So it's not a dispensary model. You're not going there to get your psilocybin and going home. You're going there to work with some type of therapist. Now, the nice thing about the initiative was it didn't say you had to be a doctor or licensed therapist to provide the psilocybin. It has this idea you can maintain a traditional sitter or medicine keeper training. I have clients here in Denver that do psilocybin, or here in Colorado that do psilocybin healing work for people and, are very experienced, but they don't have professional degrees. Technically, those people can get licensed in Oregon and work there. The process is ongoing right now. There's a lot of concern about what the Oregon Health Authority is going to do to create sidebars on this program. There's certain limitations that try to keep out-of-state interests out. There's a residency restriction here. Where you have to be an Oregon resident. That's going to keep public companies out for a while. But ultimately, basically it's a free market system. If the local city says you can have a license, you can have a license. So there will be some for-profit businesses there. It's not a nonprofit model. And so, there's a sales tax imposed on it. There's certain limitations on felons, which is sort of anti-social justice to exclude felons from the process. And this was the big thing, is that, it didn't have its own home grow provision, but now that Measure 110 passed, you could cultivate psilocybin in your home in Oregon and possess it there, but there's no mechanism for distribution beyond the therapy centers in Oregon. So that's the law in Oregon. Now, I guess the other thing is I'll hold off on California. It's got 2 years of implementation, so they're developing the regulations now. They won't be out till next year. There won't be any licenses till 2023. And so the interesting thing is Colorado and California are on the verge of some psychedelic reform. And if you want a soundbite, within 3 years, you could have 3 states that have legal, regulated psilocybin and other psychedelics. And this is the next one up for bid, is Senate Bill 519 in California. It's made amazing progress, more than any of us expected. I've been blessed to work on the stakeholders group for this law, but also the leadership of Senator Wiener out of San Francisco is amazing. He stepped forward and said, we got to end the drug war. All psychedelics that have medicinal value should be decriminalized. And that's what this law anticipates, 7 psychedelics being decriminalized. We have passed the entire Senate of the California legislature and 2 committees of the House it's called the Assembly in California. If we pass one more committee in the California Assembly, the Appropriations Committee in the House, the law will have passed both houses and will go to Governor Newsom for signature. And look how amazing, there's limitations and there's controversy about this law. Already ketamine was taken out of concerns about the date rape function of ketamine and its legal availability. Personal possession is legalized. The original draft said that social sharing was legal, and it had a very broad definition of social sharing. You never know whether it's the system is collaborating to take our rights away and screw us up here. But basically, we got the word that wasn't going to pass, so they changed the definition from social sharing to giving away without remuneration is allowed. So these are the possession. The other thing is there was no possession limits. I argued against possession limits. In Denver, we don't have a possession limit on psilocybin. It just can be as much as you need for your personal use. So what if you harvest, 2 pounds and want to use that for a year? Why shouldn't you be able to possess that? But they caved to the pressure in California and put these limits that, again, are rather low. It's a little bit scary. Although apparently that amount of LSD is a lot of LSD. But the bottom line is the nice thing to ameliorate these limits is that in California, if the law passes in its current version, if you're in a room with 20 people, then you can aggregate the personal possession limits if you intended to possess for the 20 people. So if you have 20 people, then you can have 20 times the amount of the psilocybin allowed, 80 grams. And so that's one upside to these limits, is that they allowed aggregation of them. And they talk in terms of beneficial communal use allowed. It's interesting that spiritual use of psychedelics does not poll really well. I think people are thinking you're going to use psychedelics in a church, but some kind of, we're trying to build language that would allow for this communal use, spiritual use, and that's the language in California. There's some issues with the record sealing, and they took away record sealing out of the bill, but there's still a way to seal your records in California. It's kind of a social justice issue about reparations, getting rid of people's criminal convictions. Yeah, and ultimately, all regulation about access was deferred in this California bill to a future task force. And so we're going to see what the task force comes up with. But these are the hard questions in psychedelics, is what does regulation look like? I am not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is the 2020 psilocybin legalization campaign in California that I worked on. It didn't make the ballot last year because of COVID. We couldn't gather signatures. It would have been the most free market, broad-based legalization we've seen yet. It basically said treat mushrooms like a vegetable. You can grow it. Anyone over 18 can buy it. There can't be any special taxes. I mean, this is free market libertarian initiative right here. And I have a lot of sympathy for this, but it's run by Ryan Munavar, a former cannabis entrepreneur. So this is not something the mainstream organizations are behind. This is kind of a one guy's campaign. He did bring it back. He announced it's coming back next year. So we're going to see that this is happening simultaneously with Senate Bill 519 in California. You might see an initiative on the ballot while the legislature is considering it. And my prediction on California is it probably won't pass this year, it probably gets kicked into next year, but I'm always a pessimist, so keep your fingers crossed. All right, Colorado 2022, what are we going to do here? This is really a list of questions, not answers, but I think the bottom line is that polling looks pretty good here. We did a poll last spring that had 55, 56% in favor of decriminalization. We know the voters are sick of the drug war. We know Colorado leads on drug policy. And so this is getting lots of interest from national funders, from local activists. And the question is, we have these rules in Colorado, you can only have one subject for every ballot initiative. So some of us want to decriminalize all entheogens, we want to decriminalize all drugs. I mean, ideally, we would decriminalize all drugs. Let's just do that, right? But to do that in a regulated model for psilocybin may not be possible. You could probably decrim psilocybin and regulate it in one initiative, but if we're going to do a broader thing other than just psilocybin, we need two initiatives. And so there's some talk about Drug Policy Alliance running a 2022 full drug decrim campaign, and then we're going to potentially run a psilocybin campaign here. So just like Oregon, you might see two ballot initiatives for the same reason Oregon has a single subject rule. But this is the question, is will it be a medical model, just decrim? Will it be psilocybin or all drugs? Will it be limited licensure if there's a regulated model? What about social equity? What about social justice? What does that look like? Will therapists be protected? These are the things that we're struggling with as we consider what might work. I'm going to talk, I think I have a slide about this later. One of my brothers in the audience will give me an amen on this. Is think about cannabis. We took 8 years to get from the founding of our nonprofit to the full legalization in 2012, 2004 to 2012. In this movement, we're accelerating. We just did decrim in 2019, and people are already talking about a full statewide in 2022. Some people feel this is too rushed, that we shouldn't be rushing to the ballot. We shouldn't be throwing whatever worked in Oregon on our ballot, that we should be engaging in a community process for multiple years. There's the guy that knows he wants to do that. You're going to be hearing about that on our panel in a minute. That's the question, is what is the rush? A lot of our culture exists in spite of these stupid laws anyways, that you guys are used to living underground. So do you really want this? Is this, some people think cannabis regulation is worse than the old model. I happen to think it worked, and it's pretty good. But, you're not going to like the new model either, I promise you. There's nothing perfect. I'm not going to go through all this. Again, these were supposed to be slides to prompt me. And does anybody know what time it is? How are we doing on time? I got it. Okay, good. Only half hour in. All right, plenty of time. So maybe I could spend a little more time on this because, look, one of the problems is that cannabis, especially in Colorado, was done without much in mind towards social justice. And I think if you think about the drug war and the drug problems in America, what I hope for this movement is that part of being an entheogenic person is seeing the interconnectivity here. It's not just about psychedelics. What is the biggest problem with the drugs in America? Well, first of all, alcohol kills 93,000 people a year. So obviously alcohol is a problem. But what kills the most people after that? 71,000 people a year die of drug overdoses in this country. That's more than suicides and car wrecks and gun fatalities combined. So we're talking about a major public health problem that doesn't have any serious, funding or solution to it. So I call on the psychedelic community to not just care about psychedelics, but care about the broader movement. And that is about drug addiction. That's about suicide prevention. That's about social justice. That's about reparatory policies that address this legacy of injustice. And so, there's a lot of things up here, but at the end of the day, we've got some ideas about what it looks like, but we're also impaneling BIPOC community leaders in Denver to talk about this issue because we need those communities to tell us what they need, to tell us what's appropriate. Thank you. But I can say that, some of the things that come to mind are obvious things. Like if you're going to have psychedelic legalization, you should probably have a mandatory sliding scale policy that this doesn't just become a medicine for the rich. that everybody can access it. You should probably have a policy that we should put specific money into training BIPOC facilitators to engage in healing in their own communities, because this is not just a white movement. There's lots of Latinos and African Americans that are using psychedelics, but it's predominantly a Caucasian movement, and those communities do love the medicines, and they are engaged. We have some of our brothers here from all those communities, but I think they need to have more facilitators that work on their own communities, and we can be part of that in a system that says some of the money from any of this regulatory system should go to training BIPOC facilitators. Some of it should go to sliding scale obligations. Some of it should go to some obligation of these operators to give back to these communities, to give back to traditional medicine keepers. So these are some of the questions that we have to grapple with social justice. All right, and again, too many words, and I'll try to summarize all this. But look, there's a lot of things we're dealing with in this movement. I already mentioned this, that the national groups, the classic George Soroses of the world, and the people that have given a lot of money to change our laws, and they deserve a lot of gratitude and respect for what they've done. But they have a very simplistic model. They say, what do the polls tell us? That's what we're going to do. We're going to poll people, and polling's happening right now, and we're going to poll messaging, and whatever the polling says, we're going to do. And if there's something the community wants that's too aggressive, that doesn't poll well, we're not going to do it. I was talking to my friend about this yesterday. It's like, what a backwards way to draft policy, because the community is not informed right now. We have to remember that only about 5 or 10% of us ever use psychedelics in this country. So that means 90% of the people are completely uninformed. They don't understand the intersectionality of psychedelics. They don't understand the trauma healing, the spiritual healing. And we're going to make decisions based on what they think right now without any education. It's just crazy. But that's the way big national groups work, because they want to win. They have to show their funders they're going to win. So we have this tension in Colorado between the national groups who just say, let's just do what we did in Oregon, and the local activists you're going to hear from on our panel at 12:30. They're saying maybe there is something different here. Maybe there's a community-driven model. Maybe there's a co-op model. Maybe there's all sorts of different ideas here. But this is one of the major dynamics we're dealing with right now. Is it's true that if this local community doesn't come together, that the national groups may just do whatever they want. And so this is my call to all of us to actually step up and get involved right now, because if you don't, they're going to do it without us. And we need to show that we're an organized, thoughtful community that is pragmatic. And, we've got a lot of pain and trauma in this community, including the white privilege and all the things that come with being a leader in this movement, and the respect for indigenous cultures, and the damage between our communities. But we've got to work on coming together, because, if we just sit back, the other people are going to do it for us. I already said the timeline is accelerated. This medicine thing, is it a medicine? Is it a sacrament? Is it wellness? I do want to comment on this, because Michael Pollan, of course, wrote his great book. And then right after that, he came out and said, well, yeah, I wrote that great book, but I don't support decriminalization because we're not ready for it as a culture, It's like, come on, Michael. You can't go all the way with this argument. Do the Huichol people of Mexico need an FDA study to know that peyote is safe? It's just ridiculous. Do the Shipibo people in the Amazon need an FDA study to know that ayahuasca is safe? Do we need FDA studies to know that psilocybin is safe and how to use it? But this is how people in the West and in America think about this, that, we don't have a tradition of shamans in the majority culture here. In South America, if you want ayahuasca, you go to a shaman. In America, if you want spiritual or trauma healing, you go to a doctor. So we have a very Western medicine-oriented mindset, and this medicine mindset is very popular. People love this message. The DA of Denver loves talking about the medicinal value, the FDA studies, and I love that too, but I'm just saying, if that's the only model that we're going to have, then again, we're going to have things like with ketamine these clinics are selling S-ketamine, which is a patented form of ketamine, rather than the generic form of ketamine, and so they can make 5 times the money. So we just have to be careful about, if all it is medicine, you might find yourself with a medicinal model and that's very expensive, that doesn't have a lot of access. And people say, oh, well, health insurance will cover it. Health insurance is not covering a lot of ketamine use right now. Ketamine is mostly a privileged thing with people with money that go to private clinics and spend a lot of money on that. So it's not true that the medicinal route is going to be broad-based access for people. Is it just a sacrament? That's a spiritual thing. Is it just for wellness? You know, one of the things I do is I work with several ayahuasca churches and some mushroom churches. And what we're seeing DEA starting to say is, oh, all these medicine churches, you guys are talking about getting healed and your trauma is healed. That's not religion. That's a therapeutic practice. And we can actually be recognized in the United States for using psychedelics for religious purposes. But the more we talk about it as medicine, DEA is going to say, we can take that away from you. We're not going to recognize you because that's not religious, that's medicinal. So we just have to be careful and thoughtful about, I think it's all these things, right? But if it's only medicine, that means something. If it's only wellness, that means something. So I think we have to work through those issues. I said this earlier, you know, we were talking about this last night. We all are suffering from trauma, you know. I'm in recovery from Western culture. I'm in recovery from being male. I'm in recovery from going to law school, from being an aggressive type A lawyer, right? I'm in recovery. And all of us have trauma. I have family trauma. And there's a lot of uncertainty in our world. A lot of us are uncertain about death and how to deal with that. And, you know, as my friend last night said, to add, most people look at that and say, you add psychedelics on top of that? That's just too scary. And that's why I say we seek tolerance from the majority culture. I think we have to be careful about proselytizing, about this is for everybody. Yes, do I think the president of the United States should have to drink ayahuasca before becoming president? Yes, I think that. But, I mean, the bottom line is... The bottom line is, you know, I think we got to be careful with our messaging, because if we come on as if everybody needs psychedelics and you're broken and if you don't do psychedelics, you'll never get healed, most people are not ready for that. We have to build this culture around it to make people feel comfortable. We have to lead by example with the beauty of our lives and the artistic value of our lives and our communal relations. And that's the way that over time we're going to get more people into our culture, and they're going to be more centered, more grounded, more healed. But in the meantime, I think we have to be asking for tolerance. I think we have to be saying we're a peaceful people. We seek, you know, communion with the divine. We seek healing of our spirits. We seek communal relationships. We seek reciprocal relationships. Like, we just need the majority culture to leave us alone. So I'll wrap up here in a few minutes, but these are my ideas about, you know, basically, I said 4 models in the last slide. I mean, look, there's 4 routes to legalization, but 3 in front of me. The 4 routes are FDA-regulated drugs, state-regulated models of some kind, decriminalization laws that just allow you to do it at in your home, and then some kind of co-op model where there's some type of informal economy, artisanal production economy. You know, these initiatives I mentioned right now aren't really capturing the distribution and access part. So decriminalization is easy. We should obviously do that. That's a North Star for me. If we could just have decriminalization, you know, kind of like cannabis. I don't know, the cannabis system's evil and profit-driven, but you could still grow it at home. You could still share it with your friends. If we could have that for psychedelics, that would be a bare minimum. But the hard part are these distribution regulation models. So, you know, in terms of what we're looking at in Colorado, like, I'd love to build the ability to have decriminalization at home, maybe a regulated model where people can go who need that medical therapeutic model around them, and then maybe some sort of informal economy that says you don't have to, you know, get the equivalent of an FDA license to have a small co-op where people grow psilocybin together, share it, gift it, give it, barter it. Maybe a true co-op where they all put money in and they take the profits out. You know, these are models that my friend like Travis Fluck and others are working on that are going to be helping us pioneer what access looks like in the future. There's obvious cities in Colorado that need to decriminalize even before, if we don't ever do state initiatives. And these are the obvious cities, you know. And I didn't finish my sentence, but like I said earlier, if we can build this momentum at the local level, the rest of the state's going to say, hey, okay, I love Aspen, I love Breckenridge, I love Telluride, I love Denver. Why not? They're smart people, they're good people, there's good communities. Little shout out to my friends at SPORE who are working hard, and we're going to be talking on our next panel. That's really the main community organizing group in Denver, is the Society for Psychedelic Outreach, Reform, and Education, thespore.org. Great group. You're going to hear from Duffy a little later. So I like to end with this thing from John Trudell, my great poet, hero, Native American leader, poet, who said, you know, and you can read what it says on the screen, but what he basically said is, look, extensions of the earth are power. Mushrooms are an extension of the earth. The mountains are an extension of the earth. A hurricane is an extension of the earth. We are extensions of the earth. Humans are extensions of the earth. Humans are power. We are power. We are a movement to take us out of ignorance into wisdom, that the wisdom of these psychedelics cannot be denied. And we are just dealing with 70-year-old laws that were written by men born in the early 1900s that had no idea, that had racist ideas about what drugs were. So with compassion and love, with joy and celebration, let's move together and show our power and express who we are and build a movement that decriminalizes all psychedelics. Thank you, guys. All right, a lot of words. Who's got questions? No questions. I answered it all. Yeah, thespore.org, maps, of course, follow maps, chacruna.net. Chacruna has these great events every year. We did the Sacred Plants of the Americas conference this year, bringing together indigenous, BIPOC leaders, pharmaceutical companies. We did Psychedelic Liberty Summit 2 years ago. They're going to do a specific event on religious freedom next year. So the big conferences every year for psychedelics are Horizons in New York in the fall. The Horizons conference will be now in December this year because of COVID. It's normally in October. Come to Horizons, meet all the experts. Go to the Chacruna event in the spring. Chacruna, chacruna.net. Chacruna. It's the Quechua word for the plant that produces the DMT in ayahuasca. And NOAC, yeah, NOAC Society. If you're a therapist or no therapist, the therapists are coming together. And Shannon Hughes will be on our panel at 12:30. Amazing people doing work right now in psychedelic-assisted therapy. Yeah, anybody in a community can start a psychedelic club. I love the Denver Psychedelic Club. These are great ways to get together with like-minded people. And I know that there'll be an event on October 9th in Denver from the NOAC Society, kind of a street fair with booths and things that we're going to be educating people that day. And I believe the SPORE is bringing people together in community forums. So, yeah, please get involved. The other thing with Denver is, watch for the Denver City Council meetings on this expansion of I-301. Really would love for people to comment and come and give your opinion. There you go, Denver Mushroom Cooperative. Yeah. There was a woman, I forget her name, that was a nice leader in Boulder, and we were going to do it last year, but again, COVID killed the ability to go out and meet people in person and gather signatures. So there is, in Boulder and Fort Collins, there's already a little infrastructure now of people that want to do it. I don't think they're planning to do it. Well, this year is an off year. And sometimes in these communities, the election will be in the spring, which is, some people say with Denver, Denver only passed it by a couple thousand votes. Well, how can we legalize statewide if it only passed in Denver by 2,000 votes? It was a May election. You know, this is super off year. It's off year, where mostly, you know, with all due respect, old people vote. and so, you know, you got to be careful which ballot you get on, because we want an election where lots of young people come out, lots of people come out. But there is talks about that. There's talks in other communities around the country. I believe Detroit has it on the ballot right now for November for decriminalization. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Drug Policy Alliance nationally plays a big role.
Yeah, I was saying Drug Policy Alliance is considering this statewide ballot initiative here to decrim all drugs. You know, it's interesting because when I started working 25 years ago with the Prison Moratorium Coalition, that became the Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition. We have already defelonized drug possession in Colorado. So that just happened last year, yeah. And finally we got simple possession is not a felony. But my point is local activists aren't so sure about a statewide decrim for the reasons I mentioned earlier. It's like the limits are small. Like, you know, if you really care about saving lives, you need on-site injection use, you need government-sponsored distribution of heroin and hard drugs to protect people from these overdoses. All the overdoses are a result of prohibition. They are caused by prohibition. The criminality of these drugs pushes them underground into dirty sources. So, you know, it's not going to be the end of the world to have state-sponsored clinics where people can get heroin maintenance or other drugs. But my point here is the local activists aren't so sure about this decrim thing. They're like, we're already kind of decrimmed. What I saw last year in Denver is the only real drug possession arrests in Denver last year were for fentanyl and methamphetamine. They're already ignoring all drug possession cases because we defelonized everything and there's PR bonds. So the cops are like, why am I going to arrest this guy? He gets out the next morning. It doesn't do anything. So we really, that's an example of the empowerment of these changes. You know, we're talking about community sovereignty on this next panel. It's like, what are the examples of communities taking control? Well, what was more inspiring than us actually passing cannabis legalization? Maybe psilocybin or psychedelic legalization, but that shows it can be done. And the policies have real meaning, and arrests have gone down, and we're closing prisons in the state now compared to building them. Yes, ma'am.
How do you think fantastic fungi is going to improve in the next couple of years? Right?
It's been huge, and a lot of people have seen that, and this is about the medicinal approach is really attractive to people. You know, I think it's probably the easiest argument to make is the medicinal value of psilocybin, that it's been shown, because this is what the West needs. They need scientific validation of these things. So science shows that it treats PTSD and depression, and now it's going to treat smoking cessation. And I mean, you know, the one, I said no Denver City Council person was in favor of this, but now our champion is Chris Hines, who's in a wheelchair from a traumatic injury, paralyzed from the waist down, and he's very interested in psychedelics for the neuroregeneration part of these substances. And so, you know, this is the easiest conversation when my mom and, you know, I've got opposing counsel in a civil litigation case who's a veteran. They talk about this. They're like, oh, yeah, I see how this is helping veterans, and science is validating this. So it's probably the lead argument. Yeah.
Just want to thank you for your work in this. I work in a completely different sector.
Oh, cool.
In immigration.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to note that there is such intersectionality between our worlds, too, because drug wars
Yeah.
definitely fed immigration policy. So the reform that's needed in the immigration system is very
Yeah.
much tied to the drug wars and, you know, separating families because we deported so many men in our country that were in possession of drugs. And,
Totally.
so I just thank you so much for this work.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you for your work on immigration. I did a little bit of immigration law back in the day, and it is so intertwined. The drug war is intertwined with immigration policy. You know, part of the fentanyl crisis in America is because we took away a major profit center for the cartels with marijuana. they move to harder things and fentanyl, and because it's illegal, and we've got to get a hold of our opiate problem in this country. Somebody over there? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, thank you. I meant to mention that. I think in one of the slides it mentioned, and all the million words up there, but what will the feds do, President Biden's not very good on drug policy. He's pretty resistant to the whole thing, but he's not actively terrible. His new DEA head and his drug czar, I think the drug czar used to have an investment in a cannabis business, so that's not bad. But the bottom line is it's still illegal at the federal level. Will they shut the Oregon model down? Most of federal law enforcement is done by the U.S. attorneys that are appointed in each state. And so, there's general policies at the federal level, but there's a lot of discretion of these U.S. attorneys. And, even the last U.S. attorney under Trump in Colorado, Jason Dunn, said terrible things about cannabis, played up the scare about dabs being the end of the world, but he never went after the legal market. So, I think that this is one of the sad things about our politics is that we're 25 years since California decriminalized cannabis, and we still don't have federal change. 40 states have changed their laws and allow some access to medical or legal cannabis, and we still can't get basic legalization, just some deference at the federal level, and that's how broken the federal system is. But all I know to do to combat that is build ground up, local, state, and eventually the feds will fall. But it's a big unknown, and they could shut the system down. So this is part of why somehow we have to elect people that have common sense. But I'll tell you, all these politicians, I was at a psychedelic investor event 2 weeks ago, and Governor Polis showed up. Obviously he's a progressive guy, but I think they see that, if the people lead and the politicians follow. So that's what we have to do. We have to lead. This lady right here. Cool. Oh, wow. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. And did I forget to give a land recognition at the beginning? Here we are in Ute land. I have so much respect for Native Americans in this country. And the truth is, you do have protections around peyote. Members of the Native American Church, and actually in Colorado, beyond Native American Church members, there's a peyote exception in Colorado law. If you can show you're using it for religious uses, then you're not acting criminally. But this is a huge, important issue, and I glanced on it in the million words in the slide that, part of what we have to do is be respectful to the Native American community when we decriminalize. And so the Indigenous Peyote Conservation Initiative has come out and said, as you decriminalize these substances, you need to leave peyote out of the equation because peyote is endangered and threatened in the United States. It's not, everybody talks about peyote buttons used to be like this, and now they're like this because they take a long time to grow. And there's a lot of Native American church members that rightfully should be able to use peyote. So I think non-Native people need to be very careful. And we should be drafting laws that are respectful of that. And that's part of what I mentioned about being attuned to social justice issues and psychedelics. The Oakland campaign got, really criticized by Native Americans because they said everything should be legal. It's like, wait a minute, acknowledge the special role of peyote in Native American history and don't say that everybody should have access to that. And so that's, the nice thing is there's mescaline available from lots of other cactus other than peyote. And so we should be able to give people experiences with mescaline without letting non-natives use peyote. But I just think, woo! But it's an important issue you raised, and I think you are protected. You should talk to people like the Native American Rights Fund in Boulder that knows a lot about this, but you shouldn't feel afraid. As long as you're using it in a sincere religious way, I think you're fine. Yes, sir, in the back. Listen, I understand. I'm a member of the Peyote Way Church of God in Arizona, and so I've used peyote as a non-native, but it's also grown sustainably by the Peyote Way Church of God. So yes, I think habitat destruction is a major driver of peyote destruction. Illicit market, use is a driver, but hopefully that's why I said about co-ops. Like my dream would be to have a sacred plant warehouse or greenhouse in Colorado, grow mushrooms, grow cactus. We should be able to grow these God-given plants. Yes, sir.
I think decriminalization is incredibly important from a social justice standpoint. I mean, there aren't a lot of people in prison for psilocybin.
That's right.
For heroin,
That's right.
methamphetamine.
Absolutely.
I think to link the two is incredibly important, but we're not going to end the war on drugs and mass incarceration until we decriminalize it.
That's right.
Oregon decriminalization is not perfect,
No.
but it's way revolutionary.
Yeah.
Before that, only Portugal was the only place in the world that had done that. So
Yeah.
I think you should support decriminalization and legalization.
Right.
Psilocybin.
Decriminalization is my North Star. That's the bare minimum we need to have. We're almost out of time. One more minute. One last question. But
Hey, so I'm wondering, you talked about how the clearest and simplest route to legalization is going to be medicinal and probably therapeutic use, but
yeah.
going off of the discussion about the spiritual and religious use of it,
Yeah.
what does it look like in protecting people's religious use of it?
Yeah.
How does the government regulate that?
Yeah, so it already is legal in the United States to use any psychedelic if it's for sincere religious practice, but it's legal meaning there's the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which says we have those rights. The government can infringe on those rights if it shows certain things, but basically we have a very recalcitrant DEA, so no church other than the Santo Daime and the UDV, two Brazilian syncretic Christian churches that use ayahuasca. No churches other than those have ever been formally recognized by the DEA to have the right to use psychedelics. You can find lots of churches online right now. DEA right now would probably poke a hole in every single one of those churches and find a reason not to acknowledge them. But we have to, if we are using it in a religious way, I think you have to do the due diligence to try to get your doctrine down on paper, to try to explain what it is you're doing beyond just using a substance. This connects us with the divine, shows us our interconnectivity, teaches us lessons from the plants, all the amazing things we know. It helps us to be human. It gives us meaning to our lives. These are the things we have to show the government, that it's not just some excuse to use drugs, that it's actually a sincere spiritual practice. But the DEA has announced they're going to reform these laws around this, and so there will be rulemaking in the next year. They've announced by 2022 they're going to issue new rulemaking. So here's another opportunity to get involved. I care deeply about the religious, spiritual use of psychedelics. We're going to have to engage with DEA and watch that process. But I think there will be more and more opportunities. There'll be more and more churches And really, that's a great way to experience psychedelics, is with a guide, with a medicine person. So I hope there's more of that, and talk to me about that after if you want to do a church. All right. Thanks, everybody.
I'm gonna make a change for once in my life. It's gonna feel real good, gonna make a difference, gonna make it right. As I turn up the collar on my favorite winter coat, this wind is blowing my mind. I see the kids in the street, there's not enough to eat. Who am I to be blind, pretending not to see their needs? A summer's disregard, a broken bottle top, and a one-man soul. They follow each other on the wind, you know, 'cause they got nowhere to go. That's why I want you to know I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking you
projector will have to stay there, obviously, because we have talks to do tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Also turn it off.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll just have to police that no one cuts through.
Yeah.
Yeah, still think a couple people just left like that. So there's very worried that it may not go for anything. So, yeah. Okay, well, let's go find those guys. Okay.
Very superstitious. Writings on the wall.
So yeah, just
Very superstitious. Ladder's about to fall. 13-month-old baby broke the looking glass. 7 years of bad luck. Good things in your past. You believe in things you don't understand and you suffer. Superstition is the way. Very superstitious. Watch your face and hands. Rid me of the problem. Do all that you can. Keep me in a daydream. Keep me going strong. You don't want to save me. Sad is my song. When you believe in things you don't understand and you suffer. Superstition is the way. Very superstitious. Nothing more to say. Very superstitious. The devil's on his way. 13-month-old baby broke the looking glass. 7 years of bad luck. The good things in your past. Believe in things you don't understand and you suffer.
Didn't I make you feel like you were the only one? Didn't I give you everything I could? But now didn't I, babe? After all the love I gave you, still wasn't enough. Now, babe, this man's gonna get tough. Come on, come on, come on, take it down. Take another little piece of my heart now, babe. Take another little piece and just throw it away. Take another little piece of my heart now, babe. You know you've got it if it makes you feel good. Down here on the street, looking good. In your heart, oh, you know that ain't right. And you never, 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 never hear me. You will cry all night. Just about the time I think that I can't stand the pain, you hold me in your arms, I got to say it again. Come on, come another little piece of my heart now, babe. Take another little piece and just throw it